and welcome to this TSTV news update brought to you by KVR News. I'm John Scott. Now, we've been waiting a long time for the Supreme Court to make a decision on Fisher versus UT. There's been hashtags about it. We've been waiting a long time, but on Monday, the Supreme Court finally made a decision. However, they avoided a major ruling on affirmative actions in the college admissions process, but they did warn that universities that do take race into account could be more vulnerable for legal challenges in the future. So Justice Anthony Kennedy, part of the Supreme Court, said, quote, "Strict scrutiny does not permit a court to accept a school's assertion that its admissions process uses race in a permissible way." The UT Austin had a press conference on Monday. KVR News was there, and Bill Powers seems very encouraged by the court's decision.
We're very pleased with today's Supreme Court ruling in this case. We're particularly heartened that the framework laid out by the Grutter case remains in place, not just for the University of Texas at Austin, but for higher education institutions throughout the United States.
We also spoke to Andrew Clark, President of the Senate, UGO Williams, the Student Body Vice President, and Kedra Ishup, the Director of Admissions.
Far so good. Obviously, we'll have to see what happens once it makes it past the Fifth Circuit, but as of right now, as President Powers said, we still get to maintain our use of race and ethnicity and get a diverse class of incoming students.
But with the history that Texas has, to make sure that we have highly qualified and capable students at the university campus, as well as provide room and opportunity for students in unique majors and unique fields that we need to actually kind of reach out and find them a little bit differently.
Well, I definitely know the UT will continue to do the best way possible to continue to keep the diversity here at the university, and if race is not admitted, you know, we go forth and definitely try to use other measures to make that happen. Now, what those measures are, we don't know at the moment.
While UT is claiming victory, Abigail Fisher and her lawyers are also claiming victory. Abigail Fisher was quoted saying, "I am grateful to the justices for moving the nation closer to the day when a student's race isn't used at all in college admissions." Now joining me at the desk is Andrew Messamore, the Associate News Editor of the Daily Texan. And Andrew, can you just break down what the decision means for UT's admissions policy?
Well, for now it means that the university's current admissions policy will be able to remain in place and that there will be no effect to the holistic review, including race as a factor in admissions, although since the court will now be deciding this at the Fifth Circuit, there's a possibility that the university could be expected to hold its application of race at a higher standard review or to disclose more about its own race as a factor, or factoring of race in admissions. There is something that was kind of learned from the case, and that is, of course, that the standard of using diversity is still a compelling state interest, and so the precedent that we've had under the Grutter versus Bollinger case decided in 2003 and the Bakke decision will be upheld.
Okay, so now we've had a day to kind of understand, you know, both sides of the argument, understand this decision. Abigail Fisher and UT both claimed victory. Who do you think the real victor is here?
Well, a Supreme Court decision is kind of a difficult thing to say there's a victor in many cases in this litigation. Of course, since the case has been held and reserved to a lower court, it's still yet to be decided. But as you saw from the coverage yesterday, the university president, William Powers Jr., is encouraged that this case has been, well, that the precedent Grutter has been upheld. So there's definitely something that could have been overturned has been placed for the university's side, and I think that might have been to the disappointment of some of those on Fisher's side of the court who were hoping that there would be a broader ruling against the university's application of race or the use of any sort of kind of categorical statements such as race, socioeconomic class, or gender in admissions. So all of those categories are still at place, which is something of a disappointment, I would imagine, for people like the Cato Institute or the Heritage Foundation who sided with Abigail's claim. But as you saw, the lawyers defending Ms. Fisher's case claimed a victory, and they believe because of the consensus, which was somewhat unusual for a often partisan court on cases that are of this nature, they claimed that because of that consensus there was a victory on their side. But it will be, of course, like I said, waiting to be seen how the Fifth Circuit will rule and what kind of standards will universities be expected to use.
Right. So as we know, this case is going back to the Fifth Circuit. You know, what's the next step? Do you think that favors a UT, Abigail Fisher? What do you think is going to happen from this? Well,
it's not yet decided when the case will be heard, and they don't have a legal team who will represent them. It's, of course, possible that the Watkinson Wan firm that represented them at the Supreme Court, which was the same team that represented them, the defendants in Grutter versus Bollinger back in 2003, it's possible that they will go and defend them again. But what this means is somewhat of a victory for the university because, like I said, its general standard is there, but it's hard to tell what will be happening because we just don't know yet.
All right, thank you, Andrew, for joining us at the desk. Now, for more information on this case, you can follow us on Twitter at KVR News or at The Daily Texan. You can also check out the Texan's website, dailytexanonline.com. So you think with UT and Fisher, the Supreme Court would be busy, but that's not the only thing they've been dealing with. Now, a federal civil rights law that has stood for generations will be tougher to enforce after Tuesday, after the Supreme Court made a ruling on it. In a 5-to-4 vote, justices limited the historic Voting Rights Act of 1965. Now, the court struck down a part of the law that uses a federal formula to determine which states and counties must undergo U.S. oversight of their voting procedures to prevent voter discrimination. And we're still waiting on rulings regarding California's Prop 8, which banned same-sex marriages in California, and a challenge to the Federal Defense of Marriage Act, which bars same-sex couples from receiving the same benefits as opposite-sex spouses. Opening statements began yesterday in the George Zimmerman trial. Now, he's accused of killing Trayvon Martin, the 17-year-old, back in February of 2012. Now, the defense is claiming self-defense in this case. Now, we have a 911 call with audible screams in the background that will be played in the courtroom, but the judge has ruled that no experts will be allowed to testify. That will be of the jury's decision. They will have to decide whether or not those screams are that of George Zimmerman or that of Trayvon Martin. Now, here in Austin, Texas, there's a Senate filibuster that's going currently at the Texas Capitol. Democrat Wendy Davis is leading an effort to derail a vote that would impose strict new abortion rules across the state of Texas. This bill would ban abortion after 20 weeks of pregnancy. Now, Davis will have to keep speaking until midnight tonight because that's the deadline for the end of the 30-day special session at the Capitol. Did you notice today was a little bit hotter than usual? Well, because today was the hottest day of the year, and we reached 100 degrees, which is normal, I guess, for Texas weather. It might seem late in the year for Austin to reach that milestone. You know, we're kind of getting towards July, but our average first 100-degree day is actually July 10th, so we're a little bit ahead of schedule. And if you thought today was hot, well, get used to it, because the rest of the week is going to be hot. It's expected to remain at or above 100 degrees the rest of the week. Now, that's all the time we have, but for news updates throughout the week, follow us on Twitter at KVR News. Our weekly newscast, Monday night at 9 p.m., will return this fall. Thank you for watching this TSTV News Update. I'm John Scott. Have a great rest of your week.